Great. So we'll get started. We'll do our roll call attendance first. Caitlin, you just want to go around the room, or do you want to read off how you want to do that?
I will read off my list. So Mike Ryman.
Here.
Joanna Stabe.
Here.
Kevin Wilson.
Here.
Kevin Gilmore.
Here, online.
Nick DiFrancesco.
Here.
Rosalind Kesey.
Here.
Zach Crouch.
He won't be here.
Okay, absent. Dev Sidaram.
Here.
And Deborah, I don't want to butcher your last name.
Oh, Finicaro, here.
Finicaro, okay. All right, so we have 8 out of 9 members present. We do have a quorum.
Great. First item is approval of the minutes, which Caitlin had previously sent out. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. First item that we had on the agenda there is discussion on workforce development. I don't know if we had any specific follow-up topics. I was hoping to have someone come speak today, but couldn't make that due to some sickness, basically. Couldn't make the schedules work. I think we had a pretty good discussion last time around some of the workforce development challenges. I don't have any specific action items on this today. Joanne, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts from our last meeting. I think one of the conversations that we had was around how we can better integrate the Del Tech system at the secondary school level. Some of that is happening to some degree, and that's what I was hoping I could have. I reached out to John Wicker from, it's called Delaware Pathways, which is part of DOE, and we had a really good conversation around some of the things that are happening throughout the state that I would love for him to come and speak to us about. I think at our next meeting we can set that up, and he had indicated his willingness to come do that. Some things that are happening, for example, Seaford is currently working on a project, I believe right now, building some facilities, working with Del Tech, where there's sort of a combination of secondary trades and apprenticeships and training, and then also an adult ed component, and kind of co-joining with Del Tech. So some of that is kind of happening, and it might be an interesting thing to look into and see where we could model from that going forward.
I think we should also take a look at some of the things that the industry is doing. Like the ABC has apprenticeship programs, right, through its membership, and as well as there's a ACE, which architects, construction and engineering. So that's a program that's also it's not. It is a private organization, so I think there are programs that are being held, and ACE has mentoring that they do with the polytech schools. So I think there are programs. So I think it'll be worthy of to tie all of these together, rather than everybody being in their own realm.
I wonder if we could, maybe it makes sense to have even ABC come in and talk a little bit about what they do.
Yeah,
how that works.
ACE could also join, and maybe you can, absolutely.
So you've Ed Capadonna, he's on my board, so I could, and he's ABC.
Right.
And then you have Delaware Contractors Association, DCA, Brian Short, but probably who we'd want to contact is seeing her face, Jamie Chambers. She does all the workforce development for DCA.
Okay, that's a great idea.
So one of the things about current technical education, which is under the Pathways umbrella, is that we are a combined state plan. This is probably too much information, but so John and I work really well together. So whatever they're doing at the secondary level, it has to be in alignment with what we're doing in terms of workforce and adult ed. So it is a good partnership to come in, at least understand as well. Something else I was going to say, right out of my head. There's a lot of programs out there, like there's a camp that M. Davis does where they're engaging students in high school, where they come in like for a week-long program and they get to touch on all the different trades that they have at M. Davis, which is really interesting for high schoolers. I know they hired 2 kids out of that camp last year. So it's really difficult because you're trying to uncover all of these programs that are happening, like you said, in silos, and so trying to like combine them or like at least understand what's happening. I'm sure there's a ton more out there.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing too is, and I talked about it a little bit at the last meeting, is, getting in touch with the people that are in these programs. And I can tell you from experience, just reaching out to, Polytech and Deltech and things of that nature, it's really been a challenge to have people that are in these programs, kind of come forward. We did talk about transportation was a big thing, especially when you're talking about, young students going through, whatever kind of tech program they might be enrolled in. So I'm definitely, interested in seeing, how we can, like you said, get in front of the people that are actually participating in these programs to get them part of our industry out in the field.
One of the things that I think that I heard as a potential issue is in there's a couple challenges with trying to get this back into the secondary schools. One is just facilities. They don't have them anymore. They don't have the space. So even if they have the space, the cost to bring in the equipment and all the things that they need to do to build that program then is expensive. They likely don't have the space anyway, which means now you're talking about actually building space into the schools. There's no funding for that, really. So there's a real big challenge with trying to figure out how do we then bring all these shops and all these things back into the secondary schools just from a pragmatic standpoint of making it happen. We do have the 3 VOTEC schools, but they're basically maxed out.
Mhm.
Now they have the infrastructure in place. It'd be easier to expand the infrastructure there. Some of the challenges are some of the VOTEC schools aren't truly VOTEC schools like they used to be, right? They're academic schools. And so they go through lottery systems to get in, kids go through lottery systems to get into the schools. And there's a lot of kids that get into those schools that are actually not pursuing trades, right?
Sure.
Pursuing something else. And so in a way that inhibits the true capacity. It takes away from the capacity that school could otherwise deliver. And so I don't know how you deal with all of that that's a big discussion and might upset a lot of individuals maybe. And this is coming from a guy who just put his daughter into Polytech, so I completely understand it. And I'm very happy that she got into Polytech, but I don't think she's going to be an electrician. Healthcare is her thing. So I get it, but at the same time, we do have a major problem. And those 3 VOTEC schools are the fastest solution to solving it. There may be a longer term solution that involves the rest of the secondary school system. But I don't know what that means or what that looks like. I just throw that out there for discussion purposes.
No, I think it is it's not a short term, there is no quick solution. I think it is a long-term solution, and the solution is to integrate it into the curriculum, into the, and I think that takes time, right? And the last time we met, I was talking about how when I went to high school, I was, there was carpentry that I was exposed to. There was sheet metal shop that I was exposed to. So people that are interested in it could pursue it, further.
Sure.
But there is no such opportunity over here.
I think a relatively shorter term option is going with adult education. Because you can train a person relatively quickly as compared to building infrastructure and programs and getting people, to get their children interested in these trades. With the adult education, if you already have, the problem is the people are willing to go into that. And how do we make that more attractive without obviously raising the costs, which is what we're already doing, is having to pay more to attract people. But that might be a shorter term because they're already kind of, they're in the workforce or partially in the workforce, or maybe underemployed, and maybe could do better with a trade. So maybe that's, would push that a little harder, or
So I think you're gonna have, so I do agree. I think there's probably some opportunity to expand classes, especially at Poly and Sussex. Probably at Delaware Skills, which is the Newcastle County side. I know Delaware Skills is maxed in terms of space, so I don't know if they could add more classes. I think the challenge you're gonna have there is the funding. So probably around, I mean, I'm pulling this off the top of my head, to run like an HVAC class at Polytech is probably under 100,000 for 20 to 25 students potentially, maybe like 70 to 75,000. So I know that when we release our funding, which will happen in January, most likely Poly and Sussex do get funding from the Workforce Development Board, but we have a limited pot. So that could be, you know, some new legislation for sort of additional training dollars. You know, we'd probably have to engage Poly and Sussex and ask, like, what's your capacity? Could you add classes if you had more funding?
I mean, I think we should. I mean, what is holding them back, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is it a funding thing? Is it a facilities thing? What is it? And I think, I mean, that's kind of our charge. Our charge is, you know, what's the solution? And then the solution could be a funding solution if we need to recommend funding increases for these schools or whatever. I mean, that's all fair game for this group.
are the
So-
classes being fully utilized? Are they maxed out?
Right, so that's a good question.
And the ones that we fund, because we do have outcomes, so there's, when they apply for funding, they tell us how many people they're engaging. And then we have to report up to our federal outcomes, so we do have to adhere to that.
So we're pretty much maxed out, so adding more classes would be beneficial.
Yeah, if they, you know, again, it would just be like, I think we should reach out to Poly and find out what the capacity is. Do they have capacity to add more classes? And then it would be which ones, you know, they all run electrical, HVAC, plumbing, carpentry.
They have them all. They each have all those classes. It's just a capacity issue.
Yeah, and I would also say teachers, it could have some teacher issues. There's a major teacher shortage, so there could be some issues there. But I think engaging, so it's Jeremy at Poly, and I think it's Mike Egan at Sussex.
What's the best way for us to engage the?
I can,
Can you do
yep,
that for
okay,
us?
yep.
Okay.
If there's a resource issue or a capacity issue in the school, in the physical plants, is it possible that you could tap into Deltec or some other facilities that may have the shops already built? They offer those types of adult classes and
Yeah.
education certificate programs, I know, so maybe you could, you know, transfer some of those classrooms to a different facility, different site.
The issue is getting them there. You know, how does that integrate with the school day?
Sure.
Getting them there, and from what I understand too, there's just the amount of seat hours or whatever that they have to get the certification, the amount of hours that they need to hit.
Mhm.
It's tough to align that all in the school day. At least that's what, does that make sense to?
Yeah,
you?
so for secondary,
For secondary, I'm
Yeah.
talking just secondary,
yeah,
yeah.
high school. So Deltec is expanding, they are doing they're entering into like apprenticeship as well.
Mhm.
So it'd be interesting to see now with C plus, Delawareans should be able to access those classes. To be able to receive the funding there. Again, I know the Middletown location, they've got a great location here. I don't know if they do all of the trades down the Deltec location. So again, I think it's a capacity issue, like what's holding them back.
Kevin, you got your hand up?
Yeah, hey, I didn't want to interrupt, but I did just want to throw out another idea. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but if there's possible capacity issues in the schools, would another approach be to like on the job training kind of thing where we incentivize employers to take an apprentice? So if it's $4,000 a person to teach them in a classroom, could that money be used towards the industry, towards employers, and say, you know, if you teach them X, Y, and Z, and there's a sort of a certificate created around that, then you could have X number of dollars towards, you know, towards doing that. Just another way to try to look at capacity.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think you don't have to pay the employers. I think the employers will be happy to pay the, apprentices and all.
Absolutely. I think it's just finding the people
Yeah, exactly.
that want to, be involved and.
Yeah, we have, we talked about the transportation issues and all
Correct.
those other issues, but if kids are able to get to a
Mhm.
place, I think the.
So why wouldn't that be happening
Employers
now?
will
I
take
mean,
it.
what is the issue with finding the people? What is the missing link there? I mean, how do you tap into that so that they make it to?
Right, and a lot of, Nick, kind of what you talked about. I mean, I've been to Deltec and things of that nature, not in this last year, but previously. And some of the people that are already registered in these classes are actually working for people and going there to get their certifications. So I saw a lot of that. And we had a job in Dover and we were trying to solicit, carpenters and things like that to kind of on the job training and stuff. And we couldn't get them. We couldn't get them from, Polytech was one and transportation was a big issue. So, Delaware Skills Center, we did end up hiring somebody from Delaware Skills Center and that worked out well. He came to us with minimal skills and things, but we were able to, work with him and train him. He has since left, but he worked with us for almost 8 years. So, I can speak for myself and I think I can speak for a lot of people that, are under our blanket subcontractors that if you can find them, I think we can, work towards educating them and, get them on a career path.
Yeah, that's the missing link is I don't think that our subcontractors or any of the contractors, I don't want to say any, but quite a few don't have access or don't know where to start. How do I get an apprentice? How do I go about doing that? If there was someone that could facilitate that and say, all right, we're going to reach out and get these people, kids or adults that are interested, and then have that pool of individuals, then the contractors can go to this agency and say, hey,
Is that not happening with the tech schools and the adult eds? And how come that link isn't there?
I don't know.
There are some links that are there. I mean, I think it's so there are ways in which companies can partner with comprehensive and VOTEX, but it's very like one-off. We're trying to figure out how to solve this in a sort of a systems way. Like, how do you make it so an employer has one entry point and then they can connect with whatever school either has the pathway or is closest to their company. There are what's called career and technical education in some schools at each of the high schools where they are sort of like responsible for finding the companies, and it's not sustainable.
Well, like say you need an electrician, right? Is there not a way for you to communicate that out besides the old school way of putting a ad in the paper, where you can somehow connect and link up through some state system where it just goes out and then brings that person back to you?
If there is, then we're not aware of it.
So there's a couple ways, but that's what I'm saying. There's like multiple entry points. You can go to the school, you can go to what's called the Office of Work-Based Learning, which is at Deltec. You can go to DOE and John Wickards. They have a website now where an employer can fill in all their information. It is not and that's like my side, because I have businesses on my board. I'm like, guys, we gotta find a streamlined, simple, centralized spot that, employers can say, I'm opting in, I wanna engage.
Yeah.
And then through the chamber, so the state chamber, we had it last year, we're doing it again this year. It's a Pathways Conference where it's engaging employers, telling you all around how to engage with Pathways in the current technical and adult side. So that's on April 29th of next year, and it's all like basically 101 on like, what does that look like to do a pipeline building in terms of high schools. They're even dropping it down, I don't know if John told you that, to middle schools now, try to get students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade to understand all of the careers that are out there so they can make better choices when they hit high school.
And studies have found that is the age that you need to talk to people, I've been involved in technical education, and they say, yeah, you've got to talk to the middle school kids if you want to get them into an engineering career. High school is too late
Yeah.
because they've already made up their mind.
And the parents or the caregivers, because a lot of kids go, they just do what they see.
Yeah.
But I had two things, the OJT, the on the job training, there are opportunities through Department of Labor for OJT dollars. So Department of Labor will pay up to 50% of a person's, I think it's up to 6 months, and don't quote me on that, but where if you are taking a chance on somebody that maybe doesn't have all the skills and you want the time to be able to train them, there are some OJT dollars through labor. And with apprenticeship, any employer can start an apprenticeship program. And with apprenticeship, especially in the skills trades, there's curriculum that's already out there. You just have to have what's called RTI related technical instruction that goes along with the apprentice. So the employer pays for the salary. Some employers pay for that education piece as well, especially if it's like a union. So unions will have their on-site education. They have their teachers. They've got a facility where the apprentices can come and learn. And then there's the traditional way where they would go to adult vo-tech at night too. So any employer can start their own apprenticeship.
But again, like you said, it's all one-off. You know, there's no single portal where employers can go and say, okay, you know, this is the program, this is who is going to.
But especially because like apprenticeship sits under Department of Labor, Pathways sits under Department of Education, you know, it's like.
I think some of that can be intimidating to
Yeah.
employers.
Right.
So, and I think that's what keeps a lot of them out, because they just see the liability, the extra paperwork, the extra headache I have to make sure I follow this. You know, I can teach them, you know, what to do, but am I following that curriculum?
Yeah.
So there is, you know, that intimidation that's for the average, you know, employer.
Well, and then the time, you know, I mean, especially in this day and age, everybody's probably looking for talent and everybody's probably overworked. So there's time that, and there's, you know, there are other supports, I would say, like through the state chamber. They've got, you know, they probably could have some support there around like an internship program and helping to set that up. So there are some supports out there. We could do a better job.
Yeah, I've had interns,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, that it is coordinating with the
Yep.
coordinator at the you know, Hudson Vortex is where we get our interns. And that's what it is. You have to know the coordinator and work with the coordinator to get the students in, you know, that's how it works.
Is it a reasonable goal to suggest that there should be the creation or a combination of these portals so that it's streamlined? Is that
No, I think
is that gonna be a challenge because you got
Right.
DOL and DOE, you know,
Yeah.
like, you know?
That would help my life.
Yeah. No, I think similar to the pathways, I think that's what you need to create, similar to something like the pathways. That's what you have to create a single portal that employers can go and say, okay, you need interns, you know, here are the resources if you want to go for an electrician, if it's a trade, or if it's just maybe administrative, because one of the interns we have is a young lady from Hudson Vortex that, you know, that comes in and does scanning for us.
Okay. So just kind of recap and just some action items. We're going to reach out to ABC, ACE, and DCA and see if we can have them maybe come to the next meeting, talk a little bit more about this. Ed Capodanno, I think, is stepping down, and Jennifer Cohen is going to be leading ABC.
Yeah, I was just talking to him yesterday at an event, and he's going to be there.
He's going to stay on for a little while, right?
Yeah, he's staying on until June.
Okay.
But our next meeting is, I think, December.
The 19th, I
Yeah,
believe.
so his term is till the end of the year.
Okay. And Joanna, you're going to reach out to the different tech schools just to figure out their current capacity limitations.
And I can also reach out to Chris Moody, who is I don't know his official title, but he oversees all the workforce training under Deltech. So any of the certificate side.
Okay. And then I want to see if John can come in. So that's a lot of people to come in on the next meeting and try to figure that out.
I think we may have frozen.
It's frozen for me too, Kate.
Okay, I'm texting Emily. Okay, I see lips moving, so I think you guys aren't frozen anymore. But you are muted.
How about now?
Okay, now we can hear you.
The question, so, subcommittee meeting wise, Caitlin, there's one more or two more meetings?
There's one more currently scheduled,
Uh-huh.
and that is for the 19th.
Oh, right,
The plan up until now had been to reconvene the full task force in January and to hear report outs from the 5 different subcommittees. But, you know, certainly some of the other subcommittees have asked for additional meetings, and I am meeting with our task force co-chairs on Monday to discuss the game plan for January and how we bring this in for a landing. So all that is to say, if the group feels strongly that we need to squeeze in a 4th meeting, we can try.
I mean, my sense is we need a 4th meeting. I think we still have a lot to discuss, especially on the workforce development side. It's super complex, of course. We could talk more about it, but I think, and what are the thoughts of the group? Not to take any more of your time than we already are, but
Yeah, maybe early January.
sometime in January.
Yeah.
When is the full task force meeting already scheduled in January, Caitlin?
No, it's not. I just emailed the entire task force membership to ask for blackout dates for the month of January. So, you know, I'm gonna try to use that to pick a date that works for the majority of people.
Well, I think that's a good stopping point. We'll work outside this meeting and figure out which of these folks we want to have come in the next meeting. They're all great, and some may not be able to make it, and it may work out by default. But if we can have any of those folks come in and talk a little bit more about their different programs, I think that's great. I do want to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the report from the DSHA staff on the maximum housing costs and loan amounts.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to screen share. I'm going to share a couple tables, and then I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, Brian Rosello, who has joined us virtually. So. Okay, is everybody seeing these 2 tables?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so several of the subcommittees had asked to see the maximum home sales price that would be affordable based on which percentage of area median income you're at. And so we collectively at DSHA came up with 3 different tables. This first one just shows household income in Delaware and in each county by percentage of AMI, and these are based on the 2023 HUD median income limits for a 2-person household. So my colleague Karen put this table together. I then did the math, right? So I took each of these figures, divided them by 12 to get the monthly household income, and then multiplied that by 0.3 to get the maximum amount that a person could pay towards either their rent and utilities or mortgage and utilities. So that's what this second table shows. So if we're just talking about rental, right, this is the max that you could pay if you're at 60% AMI in Delaware. But then to get to sales price, we had to do some further calculations. And so this is what Brian Rosello and his team put together. And I will now turn it over to Brian. He's our Director of Housing Finance.
Good afternoon, everyone. So with Caitlin's asked, she proposed that we help her create what's the maximum borrowing cost or what that equate to a mortgage amount and sales price based on those income limits that she presented. So we ran some assumptions and we put in at the time, I think we did a week ago. And the market's changed since then, but the FHA mortgage was 6.5%. We used FHA because 90% of our production in our first-time homebuyer program is FHA. So that is the typical mortgage. Conventional mortgage rates are a little bit higher, but the mortgage cost could be a little lower. We use a term of 30 years. Most borrowers are not borrowing a home less than 30 years. Took some averages across the state on property taxes and home insurance, as well as the average 3.5% down for FHA mortgage to get to what the total cost is. So not just principal and interest. This is principal, interest, tax, and insurance, so the full PITI for a mortgage. If you just want to focus on the top chart, the top blue line, a person at 30% AMI in Delaware, I mean, even if you get to Newcastle County, don't think we're going to find a house below $109,000, right? If you're looking at the limit for Newcastle County, definitely not going to get a house under 96,000. Where we see homes being sold today, our average sales price is about $375,000 in our mortgage program. In order to get there, you have to be above 120% AMI in order to reach those levels. You can get some homes in the 80 to 100% range, as long as your credit and your secondary debt is not too high. You can get some affordability, but I think showing these numbers here kind of gives you a picture of where the prices need to be in order for someone to buy a house at the income levels that they have. And I can pause and answer any question that you may have.
And I think this is great. I mean, we talked about this last time. We were like, well, what does this mean? What are we talking about for the price of a home? And it's pretty scary when you look at it. I mean, at a $384,000 house, and you got to be at 120% AMI. Average cost of new construction in Delaware is $470,000. So, I think it paints a pretty stark picture for what we're dealing with. And I think it also shows that affordability means something different now or affordable housing means something even a little bit different than maybe it used to mean. It's really a problem for everybody at this point, unless you're in the much higher incomes.
Sure. Yeah. Brian, what does the income have to be for somebody to be called affordable? Like, is it 50% AMI or 60% AMI?
To be inside our program, or for it to be called so affordable just means how much of the percentage of your income is going towards your housing cost. So we took that number to say only 30% of your gross monthly income is used towards your housing expense.
I think
equates to an affordable home. I will be the first one to tell you that's not the typical standard right now, right? We're seeing people, their housing expenses are probably at 52% FHA allows it. So they're spending 25% more than what we're equating for in this calculation to purchase a home that they're going to live in.
But Dev, are you asking what the percent AMI is to qualify for
a program,
affordable housing program?
Correct.
Okay, so in our first-time homebuyer program, based on IRS rules, you can be up to 120% AMI depending on family size. Typically, you're looking at 80% AMI and below. Most of the county programs who are using federal funding sources for down payment, whether CDBG or home, are 80% or below AMI. Most banks who are trying to promote CRA products are 80% or below AMI. That's the bucket. So the bucket of the white there, that's in the state 256,000 or 282 in Newcastle County, 92 and it's definitely that's where you would see affordable housing programs at. I think there are some, I know the Habitat, I think they're probably 60 and below, but most are 80% and below. Ours, you can go up to 120 in non-targeted areas.
Are you familiar with the MPDU requirement, Newcastle County MPDU requirement? I was wondering what their criteria is.
I'm not sure. Maybe I don't know what the acronyms mean, but maybe if it's is it that they're
they call it the moderately priced dwelling unit.
And that's their down payment assistance program? Because I am familiar with that one.
That's the
They're
Newcastle County.
they are at 80, Newcastle County is at 80%. In fact, we were just talking, my colleague and I, Megan, was just talking to the ladies who run that program last week, to try to help them be more efficient with it, to try to help them get more production. But it's not really working, but it's a federally funded program. The source is federally funded, so it's 80% below AMI.
Thank you. That's
Yep.
what
Any other questions on this?
Are the taxes based off the new assessments that just came through?
They are not. They are based on the current that are reached right now. I suspect that's going to go up. So once that goes up, that's going to even impact the affordability, so it's going to decline it. So great point.
Well, this is good information. It kind of gives you a sense of perspective as we talk about the price and costs of construction, which is the next item on our agenda. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And
Thank you.
Caitlin, can you bring up my PowerPoint that I sent you?
Yep, 1 second.
So this was basically a case study that the home builders took on. We were a presenter at the Delaware Real Estate Summit, which was a partnership with the SHA and the Delaware Realtors. And, you know, we've been after this. What are all the costs that go in to build a house? You know, get asked this all the time. And basically to get from, now this is new construction, and this is getting from essentially a raw piece of land all the way to somebody walking through the door. So we reached out to some of our members and we wanted to look at some real costs associated with a house. And we just picked a 4-bed, 2.5 bath, 2,400 square foot on a 1/5 of an acre lot. So pretty much a typical house that's a new construction. And if you can go to the next slide, Caitlin. So it kind of starts with the land. And we started looking at all of the different costs. So, you know, land cost with this particular example was about $38,000. That's with all the fees. That's your, transfer taxes, real estate commissions. That's all of it. That's just the land, getting the raw land together. Obviously, then you've got to design a project. It's about $2,300. These are all per lot costs. There's review fees along the way. You've got to spend fees at all the different agencies that review these plans, like DelDOT and DENREC, et cetera, the county, local jurisdictions, about $477. There's a number of bonding requirements. It's about $985 a lot. There's a bunch of other fees. Some jobs, there's some transportation infrastructure fees that are paid to contribute to projects that are offsite, those kinds of things. In this example, was $3,087. Of course, then you got to actually build all the road infrastructure, which is about $107,000. We have a breakout of all the site work down to every component of site work, but didn't really want to bore everyone with that. But that's your, paving, curbing, water, sewer, everything that goes into, getting that lot ready to build a house on it.
So, excuse me,
Yep.
so that assumes there's no infrastructure in place.
So this is taking a raw piece of land that's a farm field and creating a lot that we can then build a house on. And then, of course, there's inspections that happen, and that's about $3,500. So the bottom line there is that the total land cost to get to a place where you have a lot that you can build a house on, you've already spent $156,000, and we have not built the house yet. Okay. So when you think back to the chart that we had prior, not a lot of room left, right? Okay. Next slide. So now you got to build the house. Of course, you got to pay permit and connection fees, which in Sussex County were about $20,800. They're a little bit higher in Newcastle County. Carrying cost, interest. So from the time, there's a settlement that happens, the builder comes in, they buy the lot, they carry the lot, they build the house. There's interest being paid along the way the entire time. And that totaled about $24,000. There's transfer taxes and some other things, about $2,600. There's some engineering and surveying that happens. The surveyors are staking out the house and, doing their work, about $1,500. Erosion sediment control, $1,400. bringing the utilities from the street to the house, about $5,000. The sticks and bricks were about $246,000. There were some overhead costs for a supervisor and that kind of thing, about $15,000. So you're looking at $317,000 in this particular example. We try to pick a relatively moderate house, not trying to pick the high end, homes. And go to the next slide. So total land 156, total house 317, total cost 474,000. What did I say earlier? The average cost in Delaware for a new house about 470,000. So this is in your average kind of wheelhouse. But it gives you a sense of these things. Total cost of land, by the time it's all said and done, $30,000 a lot. Total fees and taxes, $30,000 a lot. Interest, $30,000 a lot. So just looking at carrying cost, interest, taxes, and fees, which there's no infrastructure related to that at all, is about $62,000 right there. And so preparing the lot itself is about the third of the price of a home. So we really just did this just to really try to break down what all goes into this. And are there things along the way that can help to bring those costs down? One is time, $30,000 in interest and carrying costs. So if we can find a way to shrink the time to deliver houses to the marketplace, we can save money. And we don't have to go to the legislature and ask them for any money, right? We can do that by default.
And what's the time?
Well, so it varies.
Permits and
It
all
varies. In this particular, it's the time to get approvals and permits and put infrastructure in, build the house. So there's a lot of components.
What is that average time in months? Do you know?
I think
Two years.
yeah, I mean, it varies really big based on each county. I mean, a subdivision can take 2 to 3 years to get approved in some places.
Yeah, the shortest.
Nothing's less than a year.
Yeah, shortest you could do is 2 years, the process from the beginning
Yeah,
to when
I agree.
you're able to sell the house.
So on the economic development side, a couple years back, they did an initiative called Ready in Six. So is
Still
there
talking about it.
right? At least it's out there. But like, is there something that can happen there? And then also, I don't sit in this side. I sit in I do joint economic development. They also have things called Site Ready, and they do these Site Ready funds. Where it's like somehow you get a site ready to go. And I don't know how that quickens everything up.
Yeah.
It would be different here, but like, is there things that we could do focused around those two, like the time?
So 2 different things. So I know both of those programs really well.
Okay.
Site readiness is intended more for kind of economic development
Right.
type thing. So I think Milford is doing that right now. They're building the Milford Corporate Center. It's a 200-acre piece of land. Milford is basically getting all the infrastructure in, getting it ready, creating plots of land so that if some user came in, whether it was an Amazon or manufacturing, industry, logistics, distribution, whatever, they basically have it ready to go. Here's your land. It's already zoned. It's already approved. It's got all the infrastructure, and they can get done quickly. That was what site readiness was intended for. And so site readiness allows you to get up to, I think it's $1 million, it might be 2 million now. I think they just adjusted it, dollars towards infrastructure to basically get those sites ready to go. But it doesn't apply to housing at all.
Like, could it though? Is there,
I don't see why it couldn't.
like, is there a way to do it where a site is approved and ready before a builder might come in? And then it's almost like, I don't know, I'm thinking outside the box here.
I don't see why it couldn't.
Especially since they already have target areas.
Mhm.
Like, could those target areas be, take it to the next step? If this is where you want development, get the infrastructure there in advance and make that part of the reason you want to go there as a developer.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. If you're developing these areas, you need housing for the workers. And in order to attract businesses to locate there, they need places for their workers to live. So is there some conversation around like, how do we expand that to like a housing next to each of these site ready plots?
Great idea.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the challenges, and Deb and I deal with this every day, is getting the approvals and permits for these projects takes years.
Well, then you're ready in 6. Let's talk about that.
Well, that's the other piece of it. But like, we'll stay on the site readiness for 1 second, then we'll jump to that. But on the site readiness side, mean, just think of an example, like you talked about these different plots, just getting access approved, right? Saying, okay, let's say there's a piece of land next to this Milford Corporate Center or Garrison Oak Park, or what's the one up in Newcastle, the big business park? I forget the name of it. But let's say there's areas next to it and they're zoned residential or whatever, getting the entrance constructed, right? Literally building it.
Yeah.
And then going out to the market, to the developers, and saying, hey, the site's ready to go. You got your access. It's, there would be a benefit for it to even go from there, because it takes out a huge uncertainty. The sewer's there, the water's stubbed to it. Honestly, the developers can handle the inside pretty well. It's all of the uncertainty of making sure everything to the site is ready to go, approved, and of sufficient capacity for their project. So you could do site readiness for residential development 100%. On the Ready in 6 side, I had a lot of involvement in that process. It was a lot of fun. We're still talking a lot about it. There's still some thoughts that will continue to move that forward. Ready in 6, unfortunately, so one of the bills that was passed was around the plus process. And it basically exempted projects from having to go through the plus process that were commercial or economic development projects in levels 1 and 2 within the state. Unfortunately, residential was pulled out of that. That was because there was a lot of political pushback around housing. There's a lot of folks, especially in the southern part of the state, that are pretty upset about the amount of housing, despite the fact that actually we're not building even nearly enough housing. But those concerns affected the outcome of that bill. So residential was excluded out of that. There was another bill that was done allowing temporary access permits so that you could get on site and start some on-site activities ahead of having all your other approvals to help kind of consolidate the timeline. Again, that was for economic development projects. So Ready in 6 has been great, but Ready in 6 has tended to focus more on the commercial economic development projects. There was an expedited review process that was created, which allowed third-party consultants to essentially do the reviews for DelDOT and DENREC, right? So if DelDOT and DENREC are understaffed and they don't have the staff to do it, and you get kind of put in that normal timeline and it drags out for 6, 8 months or a year, you could opt to utilize a third-party reviewer, an engineer, to do the reviews on their behalf at their direction, but you had to pay for that cost. So whatever it costs, you pay that person to do. There were some pilot projects that went through. One of them was a subdivision, happened to be one that we did in Milford for a 200-lot subdivision. And the total timeline from basically start to finish for stormwater DelDOT was about 2.5 months.
And that's
from 2 years. Or I should say, actually, for DelDOT, I would have said 2 years is including the upfront entitlement process. So I would say more like 1.5 years or maybe a little bit less, but
so
it shrunk it considerably.
Yeah, and I think these 2 programs came about well before COVID, well before the housing crunch that we are in right now. So I think if we could re-engage, what does that look like?
Yeah.
To expose,
Totally
to broaden this.
Sure.
So, I mean, a simple recommendation could be apply, and I think we heard this, frankly, it was on I also attend the regulatory and permitting subcommittee, which was yesterday, and this same thing came up. One of the recommendations was apply Ready in 6 to residential, apply the same approach.
Right.
And I think it's very reasonable to do that.
And I think you might be able to engage some of the economic development, like Linda Murkowski or Bill Platt or maybe Kurt Foreman, to say, like, when you have companies that are coming and touring Delaware and they see these sites that are already ready to go, what are some of the challenges that you're still seeing? And I bet you they'll say housing,
Workforce.
For sure they're gonna say
Workforce and housing.
Is there any information on, these are all kind of greenfield sites? So it seems like there would be some economy for the site development if it was an infill, and these lots are already prepared, but you don't have the economy of scale. You lose that as far as building a lot of houses all at once. But I don't know if there's been any kind of study or something that we could weigh the two, or maybe that gets thrown into the mix so we don't forget about infill housing as a way to also reduce some of these costs, because the infrastructure should be primarily there.
Yeah, I mean, from a timeline standpoint of getting things approved, getting things permitted, Dev can chime in. I have not necessarily seen the advantages to redevelop sites or do infill sites from a permitting standpoint, meaning from an approval timeline standpoint. Seems to take just the same amount of
It
time as
takes
it
about
does
the
a
same time.
greenfield.
Yeah, I was thinking about overall total cost. If the third is just getting the
Yeah.
site ready.
Yeah.
For that
No,
money.
I think if there are incentives to, for developers to go to an infill location, either in increased densities or some other, some other incentives, then yeah, definitely, developers will go there, investors will go to those locations because it's attractive. But, as Mike said, it takes about the same amount of time. So you can do more if you go to greenfield rather than, going.
But to that point though, why couldn't you waive impact fees or waive some fees?
That was
Right.
one of the thoughts I had is like, there are so many fees that were built into the,
Right.
into the cost that you just showed. There are so many places that you can get to reduce it or maybe even waive it if the housing meets a certain income level, right?
Yeah, I mean, so City of Salisbury did this. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this program, but I like to butcher the name, but I believe it's called Here is Home. And I actually had a slide on that because I presented it. I should have thought to bring that slide. I didn't think about it till just now. But it's a program called Here's Home. It was put in place by Mayor Jake Day. Jake Day is now the Secretary of Housing for Maryland. It was a super ambitious proposal. I can't believe he got it done, but he did. Kudos to him. But basically, Salisbury has probably worse than a lot of areas in terms of housing. They're well below where they need to be. They recognized it. And they basically created a program that said, okay, developers, if you come in and you want to do a project here and you deliver that project on certain timelines, you had to hit these timelines. You had to get it approved in by a certain date. You had to start construction by a certain date. You had to start delivering houses by a certain date. You had to deliver the rest, all the houses by a certain date. So they had these milestones. And in each one of those milestones, the incentive was waiving all taxes and fees. If you got through all of them, let's just say you got to the end, you would pay 0 impact fees and 0 taxes. And I don't remember the number. I will get it for the next meeting, but I want to say they generated thousands of lots like that in like a year.
Well, and that's the thing, because if you think about the slide that we saw about affordable housing, an average cost 475, if we're only talking about trying to eliminate 30% of that, we're still not to like a 30% AMI housing. I don't even know how we would get
I
there.
don't think you can. I mean, I think you're in the multifamily market at that point.
Exactly right. You're looking at multifamily, so it's not just single family. We have to be thinking about multifamily too, townhomes, apartment buildings. And I really agree with Rosalind. I mean, I think you also have to look at vacant, unutilized sites. I said that last time, and I really think that's part of the solution. Get with the land banks, get with the cities and townships, identify underutilized sites and really target those for redevelopment.
Correct.
With the specific goal of adding residential units.
So does it make sense then to have a recommendation from this group that says to incentivize vacant and redeveloped sites that you waive whatever fees and taxes we can?
Yeah.
Or impact fees and things.
Sure.
And that's
And allow for higher densities in those locations.
And we get the zoning, I agree,
Yeah.
absolutely, because there's a lot of barriers with zoning. When you look at a commercial property, there's zoning issues
Yeah.
typically.
That's one of the big issues. Two parts of that. If it's a commercial property, rezoning it, especially if the neighborhoods around it, and the pushback you're going to get there, it's going to take forever. If we can get a way to get that,
Get through that red tape.
yes, quicker, that would be a huge part of it. The other thing would be an incentive, because commercial property is so much more expensive than residential. You're going to need a really high density number to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Now, if you could offset that with waiving impact fees, because it's infrastructure there for, office buildings already using a lot of flushes per day or whatever it's figured for the sewer. Compare that to houses, probably not that much of a difference. So the impact fee should be waived or the very minimum, at least minimized, that would help offset the costs. But those are hurdles to redevelopment.
Yeah, I almost forgot. I did have another slide. I forgot I had another slide, but yeah, to hit on that point, actually. So that all those examples, remember, they were per lot.
Right.
So if you can increase the density, some of those costs, not all of them, but some of those costs then get spread out, right? That road infrastructure cost is an example that gets spread out now amongst lots. So density is a big factor. I do know the regulatory permitting, yes, subcommittee that's a conversation that keeps coming up there too. And then of course, expedited review and streamlining those reviews as much as possible. Those are low, no cost type solutions, ways to bring down costs, without necessarily going to the legislature and asking for some funding.
I believe DeKalb County is waiving fees for affordable housing.
Okay.
I don't know if that's.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
No,
No.
That was being discussed, I suppose.
They're in the midst of, they are proposed and have proposed this pocket neighborhood ordinance, which is a good ordinance.
Right.
I know the homeowners association spoke in support of it, which allows a little bit of infill type development,
Right.
smaller homes and those kinds of things, and eliminates some requirements. It's a smart ordinance. It's not approved yet. It goes to council
In December.
So hopefully that gets done and can be something other folks
That would
can
be-
use.
For infills, that's it.
That's a perfect
Yeah,
base for
That's what
infill.
it's for, yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. But one of the things though that ordinance lacks is, again, we're getting too far into the specifics of that ordinance. It prohibits application of that ordinance for NC zone existing,
If it's already in season.
NC zone properties, which, defeats the purpose of the ordinance.
One of the other thoughts.
Pocketed within an NC development, no?
It has to be zoned as right now.
Yeah.
The way it's written is, property has to be zoned as. So that's, hopefully they'll,
Yeah.
make that change.
I do think one of the challenges though, and it's kudos to Newcastle County for doing that. But I do think that the state could create some of these, a lot of this stuff's a local land use, right? I mean, so much of it's local land use. The counties are fine. They can, they've got staff, they've got resources, they can write ordinances and all those kinds of things. A lot of the smaller municipalities where a lot of these infill type things exist, they just don't. They don't even have a planning staff.
Right.
They have nothing. And so, for them to go through a ordinance process or change their regulations or whatever, it's very difficult for them to do. They've got to go hire some engineer or a lawyer or a planner, and they don't have the funding to do it. So I think the state could really help by creating these model ordinances. So it's doing the legwork for them and saying, hey, you should adopt this. Maybe even give an incentive for them to adopt it, right?
That's a good idea.
Make it easy for them to deal with the infill situations.
Well, that's a very good idea, man. Like to have the state planning office create a model ordinance that the towns and even the counties could look at and adopt. Like a ready ordinance that they could implement quickly.
And then what you could do, you could do it as just throw it out there and just hope they do it, or you could incentivize it in some way. So we talked about waiving fees and impact fees. Well, the small towns are not really going to want to do that. That might be all the money they get. Besides that, that might be all the money they're going to get. So what you could do is incentivize them to say, well, if you adopt this, there's a funding piece that comes with it, possibly, right, to help compensate for those waived fees that they're going to give. I've always liked the carrot approach more than the stick approach.
And I know, with fees, anything that Delaware State Housing Authority is associated with as far as funding goes, when we have something that we have to submit to the fire marshal's office, they waive their fees.
Okay.
So, and I know we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about for sale housing, but we're also talking about rental units too. But that is a huge benefit. We just submitted to the city fire marshal for a renovation job, and it cost us $36,000 for 55 units that we're going to renovate.
Almost 1,000 units, a little bit less.
Yeah, but still, it's a, yeah.
Yeah, but remember, I mean, we always use this statistic, every $1,000 means 371 families can't qualify for a mortgage.
Sure.
So every $1,000 matters. So,
And even though it's a Delaware State Housing Authority, they're working with us on that project. City of Wilmington doesn't pay those fees. Just the state, so.
So I wanted to, we got about, we're at 2:30, right? We got about half an hour, right? I don't know that we have a lot of public, but we gotta leave a little bit of time at the end for public if there's public. But, were you able to get your stuff?
I did send
Caitlin?
Caitlin a couple.
Yes.
Caitlin, Kevin's stuff, do you wanna go jump into that, Kevin?
Yeah, if you like.
It's all in the same conversation, I think, but
I think so,
I
yeah.
just don't, I wouldn't wanna get too late and then we not get to it.
I don't need much time on the timber or on the wood. I think that one,
So Kevin,
go.
which document should I open up first? Do you just want the
Caitlin,
chart?
The mass timber, because I just think that's a quick couple minute conversation.
Okay.
And specifically page 70 is really kind of the heart of this whole narrative. And I just wanted to follow up with our conversation last time with regard to wood construction and getting taller buildings made out of wood. Because it is happening, it's happening out west and it's codified now in the IBC. I didn't realize that, but it is. And that's what this, I was directing Caitlin to see if she could find that page, because it is adopted in 2021 IBC. There's an amendment to the type 4, which allows for wood structures up to 18 stories.
Wow.
So in all the data and research is in this design guideline, and I won't bore you with all the details, but it's a modified type 4 heavy timber type construction, and it's been vetted and approved by the International Building Council. So I think we're there in terms of being able to look and explore taller buildings with wood construction. It's just a matter of jurisdictions adopting that particular code, the latest.
So they have to adopt that addition, is that like an additional code that they have to adopt on top of in addition to the IBC?
It's my understanding it's part of.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
So once a jurisdiction adopts 2021, then you've already got that ability built in.
Okay,
What's the code that the local jurisdictions are using?
It would be the 2021 version of the IBC. International
ranges.
Building Code. Oh, what is it now, Dave?
Yeah, what is it now? Right?
Yeah, it ranges.
Yeah.
Newcastle County is using it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Is already
City
using
of
it.
Wilmington's like 18.
18, City
Yeah.
of Wilmington's 2018.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So there are some that have already
Some have
adopted
already
it.
adopted, most probably are not,
Mhm.
previous versions.
Do we
So-
know if, did Newcastle, because they can amend them when they adopt them, do you know if do they allow it in their amendment?
They would have to disallow it
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
allowed by.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
but they do that all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can check.
But do you know if anybody is using it? Has anybody used that
Not that I'm
type
aware of.
of
Right.
structure?
Not that I'm aware of, yeah, but
Yeah, 18 stories, that's a
Almost a picture of that.
pretty tall building.
now keep in mind, it's all engineered lumber, right? I mean, we're not talking about 2x10s here. We're talking about engineered wood.
There's some
But-
interesting videos that show that erection time is super quick.
Yeah.
And they do buildings like traditionally framed versus, this engineered lumber. It's made off-site, brought in, so most of your work is done in the factory and it's cut and specified. And then you ship it out, but then you can erect the building in just weeks or months, versus, a year.
Just a curiosity, but how do they deal with shrinkage? Because I know that can be an issue with going taller, even 3 stories, that could be an issue.
I think most of this is pretty dimensionally stable.
Oh, okay, so that's
Yeah.
it's a type of, okay.
Because they're engineered,
Okay.
they're not, they don't like,
There's no standard framing lumber, it's
normal
all
framing lumber. right?
PSL, LVL, okay.
And a lot of the fasteners, they nail and, screw in. So there was they did the shake test in Japan where they take it and simulate an earthquake and then look to see how it performed. And it actually performed really well.
Yeah.
But then you can go in and just, adjust your fasteners and, whatever, drill new holes if you need to just, make it stable again. So.
And it's lighter than steel and concrete,
Yeah.
so your footings and foundations
Yeah.
are smaller, so there's some residual benefits also with regard to cost. And, not just speed of assembly.
Yeah.
And it's better for the environment.
Right.
So there's a few compelling reasons to go in this direction. Again, I think we're there. I don't think there needs to be necessarily action items associated.
Well, I mean,
with this.
it could still be a recommendation to adopt the 2021 IBC.
Uniformly across the state.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, it's only in certain jurisdictions that needs to be.
Well, one of the things we
Yeah,
talked
other-
about, and I think we talked about this last time, was why don't we have a uniform building code across the state? And why do we have 57 different versions of it?
Yeah,
The $1 million question.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Why do we
And
exist? I mean, I'm just joking, but yeah, I really think it's difficult to get every jurisdiction,
The state can do it, though.
like-minded.
The state can.
Yeah, the state can.
And their familiarity with the versions, different iterations, I think is what's holding people back. And again, we talked about this years ago at the Board of Architects and Engineers, is to try to get the fire marshals to adopt the IBC series, IFC, rather than the NFPA, so that they all work together, all the codes work in collaboration.
I mean, we do it with the energy code, right?
Mhm.
At least Newcastle's trying to undo that, but right now we have one energy code statewide. I think wouldn't it create some efficiencies and some predictability if we had one building code that was statewide?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Make it
I don't
easier.
know if the Delaware Building Officials Association still exists, but that would be a great place to start, or to have a conversation with somebody representing that organization.
I think they do actually.
DVOA.
I feel like they do. So just kind of closing the loop on that, sounds like agreement that we should have one building code, statewide building code.
Yeah, I think that should be a recommendation.
A recommendation.
Yeah.
I can tell you one of the challenges, I mean, I know that we deal with is, for example, the sprinkler requirement is in the IRC. And we run around every time a municipality wants to adopt the new IRC, they have to exclude the sprinklers. Most of them do, because not many want them. But it is quite the effort to chase that down across the state. Certainly not an efficient use of anybody's time. So statewide building code would make that process a little bit simpler. I'm not sure the municipalities may like it, but
Yeah.
it certainly would provide for some efficiencies. What else did you have, Kevin?
We talked about the International Energy Code, so maybe I could talk about that briefly. Caitlin, I also sent you a little spreadsheet. Are you able to pull that up?
Is that it? This table?
No, that's.
Nope.
It's a different email. That's
All right,
the
hang
amount.
on. Let's see here.
So.
I have a lot of emails open.
To recap, I think we were just questioning the IECC and the new mandates 2021 version, and just questioning whether the cost to benefit ratio made sense, especially in light of the fact that what you just said, every $1,000 increase, knocks out so many people and their ability to buy a house. So I dug a little deeper. I talked to a couple mechanical engineers, a couple tradespeople, and just tried to get information. And I got some interesting facts back. One is more just a quick look at a typical house and what different levels of insulation do in terms of its performance and the requirements for mechanical unit size. And the other is much more statistical and scientific data that's produced by the IECC, an independent lab that before they actually can ratify the new IECC, they look at the cost effectiveness of what they're proposing to do. They publish this report, and it's a really interesting report. And there's some things I'd like to highlight in that as well.
So Kevin, I have the two PDFs, one of which we already shared, and then I have that table with like cooling, heating information.
That table.
The table?
Yes, please. That's it.
So
Thank
is-
you.
Okay, yeah, great.
Perfect. Yeah, so this represents a 2-story, 1,600 square foot house, right? So it's probably a little bit smaller than what your model home was, Mike. Probably a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, more of a starter home. But this, we took a quick look at this and modeled the home with different levels of insulation. And you can see the R34 walls, R64 roof, R30 walls, R49 roof, and then R24 walls and R38 roof. Sort of the baseline bottom, which we're beyond that right now with the requirements for IECC. But in years past, that was, I think, where we would be roughly. The cooling load, the heating load, you see the design calls for a 1.5 ton mechanical unit. And then as you look up and you continue to increase the thickness in our values of the walls and roof, you see that you're still in the same 1.5 ton mechanical unit size. And I highlighted that because ratcheting up the insulation doesn't necessarily change the equipment size. It adds cost, and we can dive into that with this report. But then I asked the mechanical engineer, assuming that we have greater insulation values, then wouldn't this unit, the same unit size, run less? And he said, yeah, the utility cost at the different levels would increase less than $5 a month. Worst of 3 insulation levels. So you're talking a nominal increase, or decrease savings in cost going from the bottom to the top. And again, this is more anecdotal. This is not scientific, but it was based on a real plan and a real house.
Looks like there's a big difference between the R24 and the R30, but not much improvement between R30 and R34.
That's right.
Kevin?
Yeah.
And you said R24 is no longer the standard.
Right. Right.
I mean, I keep hearing, reaching out to our folks, hey, what's one of the biggest cost contributors? And everybody comes back, energy code,
Sure.
energy code.
Sure.
Now we're on 20, what are we on right now?
2018.
We're on 18, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then,
They want to go to 21.
right,
Correct.
But there's been discussion about 24 would actually be better than 21.
correct.
So we'd rather stay on 18, probably, really don't need to go to any of them at this point. But I will say, this is a common theme that I hear often. The energy savings or benefit, the payback period, it's either a nominal amount of dollars or the payback period for the cost of the input, the cost of the increased, whatever it is, insulation, energy efficiency, takes 40 and 50 and 60 years to pay for it.
It's not, yeah.
I'm not saying, I'm talking in general. Meaning
Right,
in
right.
general, what I continue to hear with the energy code, especially going from 18 to 21, that all of the costs, the additional things that you have to put into a house from 18 to 21 would take decades to pay back.
And that's right. Again,
in terms of energy dollars.
anecdotal, and I have the actual data. So maybe we should look at that.
Okay.
Caitlin, can you, pull up the other file, please? The national.
one moment.
Thanks. You're right, it's just not that extreme. The payback is, 10 years, it's not 40 or 50 years, but.
Yeah, some of them are between 39 and 75 years that you see a reflection on. And the cost going from 2018 to 2021 to the IECC code.
Mhm.
We're in the climate zone number 4, so I'm just talking about our area here. It ranges, and this was last year's cost, $10,498 to $13,282.
Wow. So.
And yeah, and why we're talking about insulation and things of that nature, the new EPA code for your HVAC units, with the Freon regulations are going up 20 to 30% per unit.
So the second page, if you scroll down just a bit, it's pretty interesting where Delaware is relative to the rest of the country. And this is not current, this is 2021, but you could see, you see it on page 2, a map of the country.
Was it part of
In any event,
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out, so page 2 of the PDF is, I think I need to go by,
Mommy,
Yeah,
look, I made a plum.
I think there was a link.
Let me just
Maybe.
explain it then, because this, my point is, most of the country is in either 2009 IECC or no statewide code regulated. There's a handful that are in 2015 and a small amount of states that have adopted 2018 IECC. And you can see in green, light green is 2015 and dark green is 2018, and Delaware is one of those. But most of the country is actually 2009. That's the orange country color. So, we're already out there with regard to what we've adopted for our energy code, and I would argue that we hold back on the adoption of 2021 in light of the housing issue that we have and the cost of construction. And this supports that, even though they're trying to justify the reason for the extra insulation in this document. But what they highlight is the payback period and the cost. So, yeah, that's what I was looking at.
So green is 18. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, green is
Tan
18.
is
There's
2009.
2009. White, there's no code, no required code, and red.
Look at Nebraska.
2009.
Looks like 2009 maybe. Has anybody adopted the 2021 IECC?
Yes.
Probably.
I don't know.
I think
Maryland?
New Jersey did, in Maryland.
Yeah, I'd have to double check,
I think,
because
Yeah,
trying to
looks
keep
like
them all
Maryland's
green.
in your head.
I'm pretty sure, because Maryland came up with some addendums to it that are actually being adopted in 2024 code, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I think BJ was talking about that. Because he's more in tune with that, but yeah, I'm pretty sure Maryland did adopt it with some provisions.
Seems like this is a good map with a recommendation to stay with.
That's a good map, and then there's
Maryland's green on there.
charts in here.
Okay.
So for climate zone 4 on page 18, it says the cost increase from a 2018 IECC to 2021 IECC is $3,687. Debbie, that doesn't.
That doesn't,
align with
yeah,
what you said.
yeah.
And NAHB has done some analysis on
Okay,
that, and
yeah.
I think we can supplement. But I mean, what I think I'm hearing is, and I think I'm hearing a consensus on it, is to stay on the 2018.
Right.
Yeah,
And
because
not go to
right.
2021.
Not good.
The payback is still like 10 point something years for climate zone. 4.
But as a general policy, though, I mean, shouldn't there be some nexus between, I mean, so anytime the energy code comes out, traditionally it is because there's a desire to be more energy efficient, right? Every time it comes out. So different than the building code and the IBC and IRC, which looks at a lot of safety related items, right? There can be fireproofing or things that are safety driven. The IECC is always about energy efficiency. So every time a new one comes out, it is increasing that efficiency. But there's no nexus between the energy savings, energy benefit, and the cost. What if there was some requirement that there had to be in order to go to another code, there had to be a payback period less than X, or it had to be, you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You couldn't just say, well, it's more energy efficient and we're just gonna do it. Well, yeah, it's more energy efficient, but it's gonna take 25 years for it to pay back.
Problem is, that's not what, they're not looking at payback when we.
No,
have
I'm
these
saying
discussions.
make them.
They should, but.
We're
they-
here to come up with recommendations of
Yeah,
what it
yeah,
should
yeah.
be, not what is.
Yes, but with the problem, that they're tasked with, and I'm not defending it, I'm just saying with what we're always up against, because I've sat in a bunch of these meetings. And it's all about carbon footprint.
That's right.
It's not about the dollar, it's about reducing our, so it is in their mind, it is a life safety issue. Because we need to reduce the carbon footprint. The problem is, as you look at that map, we're Delaware. We're, I don't know, 1/300th of the nation. And our little increase, that less than 10% increase that we're gaining is not even a drop in the bucket compared to the nation. So us creating that burden on our state to do that is just to say that, yeah, we're green or we're achieving this is really a waste of resources. And we've come a long way with, we're like, just, yeah, looking back at that, we're 2018, looking back at what those houses were. If you look at a HERS table, where it was in 2006 and where we are now, we're immensely better. We've made huge gains. We've grabbed all the low-lying fruit. The incremental increases we're making now are not as beneficial as they were in the past. I think that's the argument. It's not, whenever we start talking dollars with them, with the DOE and with their consultants, because they rely heavily on their consultants. It doesn't carry any more.
Yeah, but I guess where I'm going with this is, what I'm hopeful is that some of these recommendations make it into a report and maybe make it into some legislation where they have to look at it.
That'd be great. We can get that.
They have to look at it.
Yeah.
You know, there are other places that have passed legislation that said that you cannot change the code or add a regulation that increases the cost of a house $1. That exists.
That would be awesome.
So those types of things. And honestly, I would rebut the carbon footprint thing by saying the more difficult we make it to build new housing means that people stay in old housing, right? That have very bad energy efficiency, right? They're also unsafe. So there is a safety component. So if you cause it, if you don't allow mobility, people to move into the housing market and they stay stagnant in all the old housing, that is worse.
That's a great argument. That's how it should be presented. Because now you're just making people stay in the older houses, which are much less efficient than the newer houses. Money would be better spent making the older houses more efficient.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at the dollars spent in the community, that money should be put towards making older houses more efficient.
The total embodied energy of a rehabbed house would be less than a brand new house, so. If you're talking about total energy conservation.
So we got about 7 minutes. Kevin, did you have?
No,
anything
I
else?
mean, that's right. So the bottom line here was on page 22, the payback period is 12.4 years in climate zone 4. But again, they're using means, deriving costs in a different way. And I'm more inclined to believe
Real world.
So it's much worse than this. It's much more than 12-year payback. So it doesn't, to me, make a whole lot of sense to adopt 2021 at this point in
I
time.
like those costs though. That would definitely be.
That would be nice.
That would improve my
If we can get it at that.
Yeah, I like that.
This was published by, Department of Education.
Right.
That was great. I did want to go around. I didn't know, just go around the room. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to chime in if they had any other suggestions or ideas related to the cost savings, centered around some of the discussions we had last time. Yeah.
I have a couple, and I know we're running short on time, but some of the new regulations that have been adopted, especially with the EV charging stations. So before we had our meeting, I actually went to a couple of our affordable housing rental sites, both family and senior, and I went in the evening just to check and see how many people at our properties might have an electric vehicle, and the answer was none. Receiving costs, and this adds to, because multifamily, we're required to put EV charging stations at 5% of our parking spaces. And an additional 10%, they have to be EV ready. So that's a big chunk of change. And now after January 1st, all new single family homes have to have the infrastructure installed there. And I gotta tell you, we're gonna build a house here in the near future, and I really don't want, government in my pocket telling me what kind of, infrastructure I have to put in there for a future vehicle, but that's just my own thought on that. But the cost for this, you're talking between $3,000 and $6,000, and it does, there's a lot of dynamics that go into that. So you have that range. But again, that's something that, homeowners can opt for and put that in there. And the sites that I actually went to, within a quarter of a mile, there were EV charging stations, readily available. So again, if, just low hanging fruit, but, that's another mandate, coming along with that. I did talk about the new refrigerant regulations through the EPA, and those are real numbers. And even HVAC units that take the current 410A refrigerant, you're seeing an increased cost with that because there's not a lot of supply out there. And, if you don't want it, somebody else is going to buy it. So the cost increases for this equipment, we're seeing it already. So that's definitely been a challenge. And then, I'm gonna talk a little bit about sprinklers, because obviously some municipalities have adopted that. Sprinklers, and I'll talk about one of our rental units that we're going to be renovating. It's not mandated, but DSHA does require it, and I'm not bashing DSHA or anything, but it is a requirement. So for 55 units, it's costing the project over $700,000 to install sprinklers into these 55 affordable units. And, you're talking $13,000 a unit. So, and it's a real cost.
Units?
No,
It's a multifamily.
multifamily. Mhm. So, that's a lot of money.
That's a big cost. Yeah.
Right. And I go back to the, hardwired battery backup smoke detectors. And like I said, and this is, we're putting these sprinklers in here, they're exposed in the units. Will the residents like them when they move back in? I don't know, but it's a big expense. And another expense that we're having is because it's within a historical development, and now the sprinkler rooms have to be all gray. So there's a lot of price tags that go along with that. And it's just, like I said, something for consideration. And I have some more things, but I just figured I'd be quick on just a couple of, key items. So.
Can I ask real quick, the EV charging station, is that a requirement in the county? Like, how widespread is that right now?
I think that's throughout the state.
The state passed something
Yeah,
recently. too,
and it's January 1st. I believe it's the state, Kevin. I'll double check, but I believe it's the state.
The county passed.
Yeah, the county already, it's
Yeah.
been in place for about a year.
Right.
About.
Yeah, the county
Yeah,
passed it in
and the
20
now
early
state
24.
is
Yeah.
what's going to be effective throughout January 1.
So it's throughout the state.
I believe so. I think that's.
Did anybody else have anything, other items?
No, I did have I agree with you. I like to incentivize the behavior you want and not penalize the behavior you don't want. So it makes it attractive for developers. to
Sure.
do that, to include it, so.
I just wanted to talk about the infrastructure, part of the infrastructure cost is there are so many different items that go into the infrastructure cost. One of the things that we talked about is parking last time. I think the parking requirements are way excessive. And that is, it's adding, even though it may be a small portion of the total cost, it's still adding dollars. So, anything that we can do to reduce that cost, parking regulation or changing the parking requirements, I think could be one of the things that.
I actually have written, if you incentivize, so if you're providing affordable housing, is there a way to make it on a calculated need base?
Right.
Such as, Debbie looked by and saw that they weren't using.
Yeah.
So, but maybe it could be like a septic where you have reserve area that you could expand if needed, but there's something, you don't have to develop it.
Right.
You don't have to do the
But
stormwater
you have space
management.
for it if you need it.
Right, and you have room for it, yes, exactly, the space for it, so it takes away that, it produces, heat island effect. on
And
the other-
especially if you are
other
close
things.
to transit, right? If you
Exactly.
If you're close to transit, then the parking requirement is still the same, doesn't make sense.
Right,
Right.
And Kent County just got rid of parking minimums.
Right, so that's fantastic.
Just got rid of what? I'm sorry.
Parking minimums.
Oh, minimums.
Yeah, so you basically just have to demonstrate, you have to show that you meet a need based on the market, not based on what their code
What the
says.
code is, right.
Anything else?
The only other thing that I don't know if it exists, but is there like I know there's land bank and all that, but do we have any idea of how many, like unusable houses? I'm just thinking about the city of Wilmington. I drive through that all the time. There's just a ton of,
Vacant.
vacant and like, is there anybody that's done a study across the state, like vacant, unused? How do we tap into that? And I don't know the difference between retrofitting a house, the cost versus like what you showed, like if there's.
Well, that raises a really good question, and I asked the architects. So if there's a vacant home and it's an old home and you wanna renovate it and maybe find out that that's a better use, right? You have to then, once it's 50%, once you change it by 50%, you have to meet all current code, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay. You agree with that?
I do.
Okay.
I mean,
Like, don't you
that's
run
a
into,
fire marshal
don't you run into
threshold,
stuff? I'm a site guy, I'm not a house guy. You run into, so I just ask questions. But do you run into issues with like, the stairs and the ingress, egress and windows and
Yes,
so.
and usually it's lead-based paint and asbestos too.
Okay. But is there anything on that list that doesn't really make sense to? I'm just thinking cheaper ways to renovate a house so you can get better use out of it versus, hey, just tear it down.
But the
Better to build
idea,
new.
there's an existing building code, so they do allow for, offsetting life safety features. So your stair, you have an old stair is too narrow or it's too steep, you're okay with that, as long as you have other life safety provisions in place. So it's not as prescriptive.
There's some
flexibility
flexibility.
in the building
Yeah.
code and the existing building code, so I don't think that's a major issue
It's not
at this
just
point.
okay. Just a question. All right. Anything else? All right. Do we have any public?
We
Caitlin?
have 2 members of the public. If you would like to give public comment, please use the raised hand function. I'm not seeing any. Oh, we do have a hand. Hang on, buddy. I'm almost on my meeting, I promise. All right, so Lisa is going to give public comment. Let me just first bring up our timer, so bear with. Okay, Lisa, you should be able to speak.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that from my experience thus far, the biggest issue has been zoning and funding, and for now and long term. And I ask that the task force consider regional planning as a solution to our zoning barrier, and to consider developers considering a nonprofit collaboration or a nonprofit arm for funding. Because in my experience with Morgan Stanley, New York, the executive director of Unique Investments for the entire East Coast, was extremely interested in short-term investments for projects that included housing for all, especially if they included services. The federal government, I've shared already privately how much funding. They want nonprofit ownership. I think we can figure this out. Or we could figure out a fee of what do you want to build? How much if you don't own the project? And through bonuses, we can supplement grants together. Just how much would that cost for everyone to live together with universally accessible housing? And the Delaware State Housing Authority, I request that we fund them to the maximum amount and create a second fund for housing. Additionally, I think we should have a community action agency for funding strictly for housing. I would also like to question hundreds of my neighbors protesting housing for all. Do I believe it happened 20 years ago? Possibly. I grew up in Pennsylvania. Do I think it would happen today? No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. If our other public attendee would like to give public comment, please raise your hand now. And not seeing any additional hands raised, I will turn it back over to our chair.
Great. Well, with that, we'll have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
There you go. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.